We're going to continue talking about stablecoins and payments. So, Societe Generale, or SocGen, which is a French bank, third largest bank in Europe, actually issued their own stablecoin recently. So basically what happens is for deposits that they have, they're going to issue a cryptographic token against it. And they've done it based on EU regulations, based on these MICA regulations that we've seen. So this is not something that they've done in hopes that the regulators don't say anything. They have done this exactly to the specs of the regulators, and they've issued their own stablecoin. So it's worth €1, and it is being traded on an exchange. It's being traded on Bitstamp, meaning it can be traded against Bitcoin or against ETH or against several other cryptocurrencies. So instead of trading Bitcoin against USDT or Tether, you can trade it against the SocGen Euro coin. Why is this important? It seemed like just one of those experiments, and actually at this point it is kind of an experiment. But this kind of harkens back to the days of like the Medicis and the kind of the early days of banknotes, which said you can deposit your assets with us. And in those times, of course, it was things like gold and silver. You can deposit assets with us and we will issue you notes against it such that you can go spend those if you want to. And if anyone comes back to us with the notes, we will give them that amount of assets. So now what we have is, instead of necessarily a central bank issuing banknotes, we now have a bank actually issuing those banknotes. And why are they doing that? Because we have the technology to do it. And I don't think it's very long before we see, banks in the US try to do this. I don't think it'll be very long before we see banks like Chase and Bank of America and Wells Fargo start issuing their own tokens that are publicly available. Of course, JP Morgan already has JPM coin, but they use that internally. But I don't think it'll be long before we see them going external, because then it means that they might want us to deposit our money there. They're going to go earn on our money, and then we can then go participate in the decentralized ecosystem. We can go utilize those tokens on chain. I think that's potentially a direction we're going to go, rather than having the government always be the one that issues these notes. I could see it, in years going, I can deposit some asset that isn't $1 to get a JPM coin or to get a Wells Fargo coin. I can potentially deposit some asset that is some other type of token, some other type of asset, a real estate asset or something like that, and have the requisite amount of stable coins issued against that. That might be what happens one day. What does this mean for you as financial professionals? Well, it means we're utilizing the technology to take baby steps forward into how we're going to see this work on the financial scene. We're taking baby steps to say, what can banks do now that we have this technology? We didn't necessarily have the tech for all these different banks to issue banknotes in the past, because they would be very disjointed. And the reason why central banks got involved is to standardize, but we can standardize now via the technology. So it's going to be really interesting to see what innovations come about when smart people go, okay, well, now that we have this ability to issue a stable coin, a regulated stable coin against assets, and those assets currently are fiat currency, what if we can issue those against other types of assets? What are the standards that are going to be created, and where can that take us? And that's what's going to be really interesting. Am I going to get stable coins from a bank issued against income that I have, issued against future income? Am I going to get it issued against assets that I have it be from that particular bank? And if it's a bank, why can't it just be a protocol? And that's what we've already seen in decentralized finance. I can get a stable coin like DAI issued against assets that I deposit into the Maker protocol. This is just banks doing it now and making those tokens readily available. So this is really interesting. Again, as a financial professional, it's just the understanding that eventually we will be able to transact financially outside of the banking system. We will be able to transact financially using things like stablecoins, using digital assets on blockchains. And once we start doing that just a little bit, it starts out with things like payments and stablecoins, and it moves to, once I have stablecoins, why do I need to go back into dollars? Why do I need to go back into fiat? Why do I need to go back into a bank? I can just now participate in the decentralized finance ecosystem without having to go back in that bank. So as an advisor, you're going to have to help people, again, with safety and security. You're going to have to understand how people are earning their money in stablecoins and what that means, what the transparency of the blockchain means, what options they're going to have available to them to be able to earn, to deposit, to keep it safe. What options are they going to have to invest that money, knowing full well that you might not ever have custody of those assets, that the centralized custodians that you've known in the past might not ever have custody of those assets. That's what we're doing. This is an experiment. SocGen has been pretty good about experimenting. They've done things like issuing tokens against loans that they've had. They're really experimenting in this world and seeing, not just throwing things and seeing what's going to stick, but going, this makes sense. This is how we've progressed in finance in the past. And now we have the technology to go back to some of those items like self-custody, like banknotes actually issued by a bank, like banknotes that are backed up by assets rather than backed up by the full faith and credit of the government or something like that. The direction we're going, again, because the technology is giving us the leeway, the ability, the technical ability, the standards ability to go forward, issue with experiments like banks creating their own stablecoins. And that, I think, is just going to accelerate as soon as we get some regulations here in the US, but it's going to definitely accelerate in Europe, where they already have regulations.